You know what hurts the most? It's not the betrayal itself. It's the casual way they deliver it. Like it's nothing. Like you're nothing. That text message from my mother. I can still see it burning on my screen. We don't want you at dinner tonight. Your sister said you'd ruin her plans. Just like that. No explanation. No apology. Just a cold, heartless dismissal from the people who are supposed to love me unconditionally. I stared at that message for what felt like hours. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. The pain was physical, you know? Like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it was about to explode. This wasn't the first time they'd made me feel like I was the problem, like I was some kind of burden they had to manage. But this was different. This was them telling me, in the clearest possible way, that I didn't belong, that my own sister would rather have me erased from her special evening than deal with my presence. What plans could I possibly ruin? What had I ever done to deserve this kind of treatment? I replayed every family gathering, every conversation, every moment I'd tried to connect with them. And you know what I realized? I'd been trying so damn hard to fit into their perfect little narrative that I'd forgotten who I really was. I'd been bending and breaking and twisting myself into shapes that didn't feel right, all because I wanted them to accept me, to love me, to see me. But they never did. They saw some version of me that existed only in their minds, some troublemaker, some black sheep, some inconvenience that needed to be managed or excluded when it suited them. The real me? The woman I'd become? They had no idea who that was. And in that moment, with my phone clutched in my trembling hand, I realized something that changed everything. I realized I didn't need them to know. I didn't need them to see. I didn't need anything from them anymore. The anger rose in me like a tidal wave. Pure, burning rage that made my vision blur, and my jaw clenched so tight, I thought my teeth would crack. How dare they? How dare they treat me like I'm worthless? After everything I'd accomplished, everything I'd built on my own, without their support, without their encouragement, without a single word of pride from their lips. I'd made something of myself despite them, not because of them. And they had the audacity to uninvite me from a family dinner like I was some acquaintance they could just dismiss? I wanted to scream. I wanted to call them and unleash every bit of fury that was boiling inside me. I wanted to tell them exactly what I thought of their precious family dinner and their precious golden child, who couldn't bear to have me in the same room. But I didn't. You want to know why? Because they didn't deserve my reaction. They didn't deserve to see how much they'd hurt me. They didn't deserve the satisfaction of knowing they could still get under my skin. So I did nothing. I didn't respond. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just sat there in my apartment, alone, while they gathered around a table that should have had a place for me, while they laughed and talked, and pretended like my absence didn't mean anything, while my sister celebrated whatever plans were so important that my own existence would ruin them. The silence from my end was deafening, and it was intentional. It was my first act of defiance, though they didn't know it yet. That night was one of the longest of my life. The pain kept washing over me in waves. I'd think I was okay, that I'd processed it, that I'd moved past it, and then it would hit me again. The rejection, the exclusion, the realization that the people who should love me most in this world had chosen not to. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just lay there in the dark, feeling everything and nothing all at once. But when the morning came, something had shifted inside me. The pain was still there, don't get me wrong. It was a constant ache in my chest that I knew would take a long time to fade. But alongside it was something else, something harder, something colder, a determination that felt like steel in my spine. I got up, I got dressed in my best suit, and I went to my office. Because that's who I am. I'm Jenny, and I don't let anything break me, not even my own family. My office is on the 23rd floor of a building downtown, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, my name on the door, my team looking to me for leadership. This is what I'd built. This is the life I'd created, when I stopped waiting for my family's approval and started believing in myself. Every step I took into that building that morning felt like a reclamation of my power. They could exclude me from their dinner table, but they couldn't touch this. This was mine. I threw myself into work that morning, with an intensity that surprised even me. Meetings, emails, decisions that affected hundreds of people. This was where I belonged. This was where I mattered. Not at some family dinner where I was treated like an inconvenience. Here, I was respected. Here, I was valued. Here, I was seen for who I really was. And it felt good. It felt right. It felt like coming home after being lost for too long. Around 11 o'clock, my assistant buzzed my intercom. "Jenny, your sister is here to see you." My blood ran cold. Then it ran hot. Then it ran cold again. What was she doing here? What could she possibly want? The nerve of showing up at my workplace after what they'd done. After excluding me. After hurting me. After making it clear I wasn't wanted. And now she wanted something from me? The audacity was breathtaking. "Send her in," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I stood up from my desk and positioned myself in front of it, arms crossed. I wanted to be standing when she walked in. I wanted her to see me in my element, in my power, in the life I'd built without them. I wanted her to feel small, in a way she'd made me feel small my entire life. The door opened, and there she was. My sister. Looking uncertain, which was unusual for her. She was always so confident, so sure of herself, so comfortable in her role as the favorite child. But standing in my office, she looked different. Nervous, maybe, or maybe just surprised. Like she hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected me to be successful. Hadn't expected me to have built something real and impressive. Good. Let her be surprised. Let her see what she'd been too blind to notice. She opened her mouth to speak, and I held up my hand. "No," I said. One word, simple, final. The anger was coursing through me like electricity, but my voice was calm, controlled. That's the thing about pain this deep, it makes you cold, it makes you calculated. I don't want to hear it. Whatever you came here to say, whatever excuse you've prepared, whatever justification you think makes last night okay, I don't want to hear it. Her eyes went wide. She wasn't used to this. Wasn't used to me standing up for myself. Wasn't used to me having boundaries, or self-respect, or the power to tell her no. For so long, I'd been the one trying to make peace, trying to smooth things over, trying to be accepted, but that version of me was gone. She died somewhere between that text message and this moment. "You need to leave," I continued, my voice still eerily calm, despite the rage burning in my chest. "You don't get to exclude me from your life when it's convenient, and then show up here when you need something. You don't get to treat me like I'm nothing and then expect me to welcome you with open arms. That's not how this works anymore. That's not how I work anymore." I could see her struggling to process this, to understand this new dynamic where she wasn't in control, where I wasn't the one begging for scraps of attention and approval. The power had shifted, and she felt it. I could see it in her face, in the way she stood there, frozen, trying to figure out what to say, but there was nothing to say. Nothing that would make this okay. Nothing that would erase the pain of last night, or the years of similar treatment that preceded it. "My assistant will show you out," I said, walking back around my desk and sitting down. I picked up a file and opened it, looking down at the papers as if she was already gone, as if she didn't matter enough for me to even maintain eye contact. It was brutal, I know. It was harsh, but it was necessary. For me, for my sanity, for my self-respect. I needed her to understand that I was done being treated as less than. Done being the family scapegoat. Done being invisible. I didn't look up as she left. I didn't watch her walk out. I just kept my eyes on those papers. Not really seeing them, just using them as a shield. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't just pain. It was adrenaline. It was the rush of finally standing up for myself. Finally setting a boundary. Finally saying enough is enough. The moment the door closed behind her, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My whole body was trembling. The anger was still there, mixed with something that might have been satisfaction, or might have been grief. Probably both. Because even though I'd just asserted my power, even though I'd just shown her that she couldn't treat me like garbage, it still hurt. It still ached in that deep place in my chest, where family is supposed to live, where love is supposed to be unconditional, where belonging is supposed to be guaranteed. But I couldn't think about that. Not now. Not yet. I had work to do. I had a life to live. I had proven to myself that I was stronger than their rejection, that I could stand on my own, that I didn't need them to validate my worth. And that had to be enough. It had to be. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been excluded or dismissed, or made to feel like you're the problem, hit that subscribe button. Because this story isn't over, and you need to hear what happens next. You need to know that you're not alone in this pain, that others have felt it too, that there's a way through it. The rest of that day was a blur. I moved through meetings and calls on autopilot, my mind constantly drifting back to the look on my sister's face when I told her to leave. Part of me felt guilty. That's the worst part about family trauma, isn't it? They condition you to feel guilty for having boundaries. They make you think that protecting yourself is somehow selfish or wrong. But I pushed that guilt away. I reminded myself of the text message, of the casual cruelty, of the years of being treated as lesser than. I was in the middle of reviewing a contract when my phone rang. My mother. Of course. My sister must have called her immediately, crying about how mean I was, how unreasonable, how I'd embarrassed her by kicking her out of my office. I stared at that incoming call, feeling the anger rise again. Did she really think I'd answer? Did she really think I owed her an explanation, after what they'd done? I let it go to voicemail. Then I blocked the number. Not forever, maybe, but for now, for today, I needed space. I needed time to process everything without them constantly pulling me back into their drama, without them making me feel like I was the villain in a story where I was actually the victim. I needed to breathe without the weight of their expectations and judgments crushing my chest. But the calls didn't stop. They never do they? My phone kept lighting up with texts from extended family members. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly concerned about family unity. Aunts who'd never stood up for me before suddenly acting like I was the one causing problems. It was almost funny, in a twisted way. Where were all these people when I was excluded from dinner? Where was their concern for family unity then? Where were their messages telling my sister and mother that what they did was wrong? The rage I felt reading those messages was different from the anger I'd felt before. This was colder, more bitter, because it showed me so clearly how the game was rigged. I was expected to take the mistreatment silently, to be the bigger person, to forgive and forget, and pretend like my feelings didn't matter. But the moment I stood up for myself, the moment I set a boundary, suddenly I was the bad guy. Suddenly I was the one tearing the family apart. Well, let them think that. Let them paint me as the villain, if it makes them feel better about their own complicity. I was done playing by their rules. Done pretending that their approval mattered. Done shrinking myself to make them comfortable. I turned my phone on silent, and got back to work, because that's what mattered. My career, my success, my peace of mind, not their opinions, not their judgment, not their conditional love that wasn't really love at all. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine, and finally let myself feel everything. The pain came in waves so intense I thought I might drown in them. I cried. God, I cried like I hadn't cried in years, for the family I wished I had, for the acceptance I'd always craved, for the little girl inside me who just wanted to be loved without conditions, for the woman I'd become, who'd had to learn that some people, even family, aren't capable of that kind of love. But alongside the grief was something else, something that felt like freedom. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be who they wanted me to be. I wasn't twisting myself into shapes that didn't fit. I wasn't begging for scraps of affection from people who'd made it clear I wasn't worth a full meal. I was just me, Jenny, successful, independent, strong. And that had to be enough. I had to be enough for myself, because I was never going to be enough for them. The days that followed were strange, quiet. I went to work, came home, lived my life. But there was this constant awareness of the absence, of the silence, from my family. Part of me expected them to reach out, to apologize, to try to make things right, but they didn't, and that told me everything I needed to know. Their pride was more important than our relationship. Being right was more important than making amends, and I was supposed to just accept that, just swallow my hurt, and pretend everything was fine. But I wasn't going to do that. Not this time. Not ever again. I'd spent too many years accepting unacceptable treatment, too many years making excuses for them, too many years hoping they'd change, hoping they'd see me. hoping they'd love me the way I deserved to be loved. And where had it gotten me? Nowhere. Just more pain, more disappointment, more proof that I was setting myself up for heartbreak by expecting basic decency from people who'd shown me repeatedly they weren't capable of it. About a week after the office incident, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was my mother. She'd borrowed someone's phone to get around the block. Clever. Manipulative. Exactly what I should have expected. Her voice was tight, controlled anger, barely concealed beneath a veneer of motherly concern. "We need to talk about your behavior," she said. "Your behavior, not their behavior in excluding me. Not my sister's behavior in showing up at my workplace. My behavior in standing up for myself." I almost laughed. Almost. But the pain was too fresh for laughter. "No," I said, echoing the word I'd said to my sister. "We don't need to talk about anything. You made your choice when you uninvited me from dinner. I made mine when I kicked her out of my office. We're even. We're done." My voice was shaking, but I kept going. I needed to say this. Needed to get it out. "You don't get to treat me like I'm nothing, and then get upset when I refuse to play along anymore." There was silence on the other end. Then, "You're being dramatic. It was just one dinner. Your sister needed a calm evening to discuss something important, and you know how you can be. How I can be." Those words hit me like a slap. How I can be. Difficult. Problematic. Too much. Not enough. All the labels they'd put on me over the years to justify their mistreatment. To make it my fault, that they couldn't love me properly. To shift the blame from their actions to my character. "You're right," I said, and I could hear her relief in the breath she took. She thought I was backing down, thought I was falling back into the old pattern. I can be someone who expects basic respect from her family. I can be someone who won't accept being excluded and dismissed. I can be someone who knows her worth isn't determined by whether or not you approve of her. That's exactly how I can be. And if that's a problem for you, that's your problem, not mine. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The adrenaline was pumping through my system, fight or flight response in full effect even though the confrontation was over. I felt sick, empowered, terrified, liberated, all at once. Because I'd just done something I'd never done before. I'd chosen myself over their comfort. I'd prioritized my well-being over family peace. And it was both the hardest and the easiest thing I'd ever done. The guilt tried to creep in. It always does. That voice in my head that sounded like my mother, telling me I was being selfish, dramatic, unfair. That voice that had been planted there over years of conditioning, years of being told that my feelings mattered less than everyone else's. But I fought it. I reminded myself of the text message, of the casual cruelty, of the years of similar treatment. I reminded myself that I deserved better, that everyone deserves better, than to be treated as an afterthought by the people who claim to love them. Over the following weeks, I started to see things more clearly. I started to understand that this wasn't really about one dinner or one confrontation in my office. This was about a lifetime of being made to feel lesser than. A lifetime of my sister being the golden child, while I was the scapegoat. A lifetime of my achievements being minimized, and my flaws being magnified. A lifetime of trying to earn love that should have been freely given. And I was done. So completely done. But here's the thing about setting boundaries with toxic family members. They don't just accept it and move on. They escalate. They try to force you back into the old patterns because your change threatens their comfortable dynamic. And that's exactly what happened. I started hearing through the grapevine, through mutual friends, and distant relatives, about the narrative being spun about me, how I was unstable, how success had gone to my head, how I'd turned my back on family, how I was the one causing all the problems. It hurt. Of course it hurt. Even though I knew it was coming, even though I knew they'd try to make me the villain, it still hurt to hear. Because part of me, that little girl inside who just wanted to be loved, still cared what they thought, still wanted them to understand, still hoped that maybe, somehow, they'd have a moment of clarity, and realize how badly they'd treated me. But they didn't. They doubled down. They made themselves the victims of my unreasonable behavior, and I had to accept that they probably always would. But you know what? I also started to see who my real family was. The friends who checked in on me, the colleagues who'd noticed I seemed off, and asked if I was okay. The chosen family I'd built, without even realizing it. These were the people who saw me for who I really was, and loved me anyway. Who celebrated my successes instead of minimizing them. Who made space for me, instead of excluding me. Who proved that family isn't just about blood, it's about love, and respect, and showing up for each other. And my career? It thrived. Turned out that not carrying the weight of family drama, and constantly trying to prove myself to people who'd never approve, freed up a lot of mental and emotional energy. I closed the biggest deal of my career, got promoted, expanded my team, my name started appearing in industry publications. I was succeeding beyond my wildest dreams, and I was doing it without their support. Actually, I was doing it in spite of their lack of support, and that felt powerful. Months passed. The pain didn't disappear, but it changed. It became less sharp, less consuming, less central to my daily existence. I built a life that I loved, surrounded by people who valued me. I traveled, I pursued hobbies, I invested in friendships, I went to therapy, and worked through decades of family trauma. I learned what healthy relationships looked like, and how to spot red flags. I grew in ways I never could have if I'd stayed stuck in that toxic dynamic. And then, one day, I got an email from my sister. The subject line read, "I'm sorry." My first instinct was to delete it without reading. My second was to read it, and then delete it. But curiosity got the better of me. Or maybe it was that part of me that still hoped for reconciliation, still believed that people could change, still wanted to believe that family could be what it was supposed to be. The email was long, pages and pages of her processing everything that had happened, how she'd been thinking about our relationship, how she'd started to realize that, maybe, possibly, she hadn't treated me fairly over the years. It wasn't a full apology. There were still justifications, still excuses, still attempts to minimize what had happened, but it was something. It was more self-awareness than she'd ever shown before, and I didn't know what to do with it. I sat with that email for days, read it multiple times, analyzed every word, talked about it in therapy, discussed it with trusted friends, and I realized something important. Whether or not I forgave her, whether or not we reconciled, whether or not our relationship ever became healthy, I was going to be okay. Because I'd built a life that didn't depend on their approval or acceptance. I'd found my worth within myself, rather than in their validation. And that was the real victory. That was the real revenge, if you could call it that. Revenge is such a strong word. What I'd done wasn't about hurting them back. It was about refusing to be hurt anymore. It was about standing up and saying, I deserve better than this, and meaning it. It was about living my life on my terms, instead of constantly trying to meet their impossible standards. It was about choosing peace over dysfunction, even when that choice came with its own kind of pain. I did eventually respond to my sister's email. Not right away. I took my time. Made sure I was responding from a place of clarity, rather than emotion. My response was short. I acknowledged her email. I told her that I appreciated her willingness to reflect on our relationship. I also made it clear that if we were going to move forward, things would have to be different. That I wasn't going back to the old dynamic. That I had boundaries now, and they weren't negotiable. That respect wasn't optional, it was required. Her response was better than I expected. Not perfect. We're not suddenly best friends, we probably never will be, but there's a tentative peace between us now. A cautious rebuilding of something that might someday resemble a healthy relationship, or might not, and I'm okay with either outcome. Because my well-being doesn't depend on whether she can rise to meet my boundaries, it depends on me maintaining them regardless of her response. My mother is a different story. She hasn't apologized, hasn't acknowledged any wrongdoing, hasn't shown any willingness to see things from my perspective, and I've had to accept that she probably never will. That her version of events, where I'm the difficult one, and she's the victim of my unreasonable behavior, is the one she's committed to. And that's her choice to make. Just like it's my choice to limit contact, to protect my peace, to refuse to engage with someone who can't treat me with basic respect. It's been a journey. A painful, difficult, transformative journey. From that text message telling me I wasn't wanted at dinner, to kicking my sister out of my office, to establishing boundaries I never thought I'd be strong enough to maintain. I've learned so much about myself, about what I'll accept and what I won't, about the difference between being alone and being lonely, about the strength it takes to choose yourself when you've been conditioned your whole life to put others first. And here's what I want you to understand. If you're in a similar situation, if you're dealing with family members who treat you like you're less than, like you're the problem, like your feelings don't matter, you have choices. You're not stuck. You're not powerless. You can set boundaries. You can choose yourself. You can build a life that doesn't revolve around earning the approval of people who've shown you they're not capable of giving it. It's hard. It's painful. It's terrifying. But it's possible. And you deserve it. The life I have now isn't perfect. I still have days where the grief of losing my family, or at least the family I wished I had, hits me hard. Days where I wonder if I overreacted, if I should have tried harder, if I'm the problem after all. But those days are getting fewer and further between. Most days, I wake up grateful for the life I've built, proud of the woman I've become, content with the peace I've chosen over the chaos I left behind. My office still has my name on the door. I still walk in every day, with my head held high. I still make decisions that affect hundreds of people. I still succeed in ways my family never believed I could. But now, I'm not doing it to prove anything to them. I'm doing it for me, because I love what I do, because I'm good at it, because it fulfills me in ways that seeking their approval never did. And that shift in motivation has made all the difference. The truth about toxic family dynamics is that they rely on you staying small, on you believing that you're the problem, on you constantly trying to fix something that isn't your responsibility to fix. The moment you stop playing that game, the moment you stand up and say, "No more," everything changes. The power dynamic shifts, the narrative crumbles, and you get to see clearly, maybe for the first time, what was really happening all along. What was happening with me was simple, really. I was the scapegoat, the one they could blame, the one they could exclude, the one whose feelings didn't matter because they'd decided I was difficult or dramatic or too sensitive, and I'd accepted that role because I didn't know I had another option, because I thought family was supposed to be forever, no matter how they treated you, because I believed the lie that blood is thicker than water, and you owe your family loyalty even when they show you none in return. But I know better now. I know that the full quote is, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb," that the bonds we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into. That family is supposed to be a sanctuary, not a battlefield. And if your biological family can't provide that, you have every right to build your own, to surround yourself with people who choose you back, who celebrate you instead of tolerating you, who include you instead of excluding you. That night of the dinner, I wasn't invited to, feels like a lifetime ago now. In some ways it was. It was the end of one version of me, and the beginning of another. The version who knows her worth, who sets boundaries, who chooses peace over dysfunction, who understands that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who can't love you the way you deserve, even when those people are family. Especially when those people are family. So here's what I want to leave you with. Your worth is not determined by how your family treats you. Your value is not diminished by their inability to see it. Your success is not less meaningful because they can't celebrate it. You are enough exactly as you are. And if the people who are supposed to love you most can't recognize that, it says everything about them and nothing about you. Remember that. Hold on to that. Let it be the truth that guides you when everything else feels uncertain. And if you've made it this far in my story, if something I've said has resonated with you, if you see your own pain reflected in mine, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me I'm not alone in this. Because that's what we all need, isn't it? To know we're not alone. To know that others have walked this path and survived. To know that there's hope on the other side of the pain. And there is. I promise you, there is. The woman I am today, standing in her office on the 23rd floor, living a life she built with her own hands, surrounded by people who genuinely love and respect her, would not exist without that painful text message. Without being excluded. Without feeling the full weight of my family's rejection and deciding I was done accepting it. That pain was the catalyst for the most important transformation of my life. And while I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, I also wouldn't trade who I've become because of it. I am Jenny. I am successful. I am strong. I am worthy. I am enough. 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 And I don't need anyone's permission or approval to be any of those things. Not anymore. Not ever again. And neither do you.